Hello and welcome to Season 11, Episode 17 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday the 3rd of July, and we're going to discuss what's been happening in the news and interview Daniel Foré from the Elementary OS project. I'm Alan, and joining me this week is just Martin. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Why are you losing it at the start of the podcast? I haven't said anything and I can already hear the rise in your voice.
Internally, so what's just happened is England have played Colombia in the World Cup, and I was so tempted to just blurt out the score. So as soon as I thought of it, I started smiling, and I was thinking, I could do it, and then I thought, no, that's a horrible thing to do, but I still wanted to do it anyway.
So for the benefit of the listeners, we're recording this as England are playing Colombia in the World Cup, and Alan is on pain of death not to mention anything about the game to me, because I'm going to watch it after we've recorded the podcast. So thank you for not ruining the rest of my evening.
What have you been up to recently?
Well, I have been off the back of making that snap of Trackmania Nations Forever.
A highly successful snap,
Yes, a very successful snap. I was looking for other good games to see what could be snapped, and I've made a snap of Xonotic, which is the free and fast arena shooter.
So it's a first person in an arena, running around collecting guns, shoot everyone, kind of thing.
So quite recently...
Very much not a driving game.
Very much not a driving game. I was recently introduced to Ballistic Overkill, which is a game you can get for Linux on Steam, and Xonotic seems to be in that vein. You know, it's like an original, I think it's based originally on the Quake 3 engine, but it's been, updated significantly over the years, and it's got a whole load of maps and different weapons and what have you. But the reason that I picked this is if you go and look at the GetDeb website, which has hosted games traditionally over the years, it's the number one game that they serve. But also, GetDeb doesn't work at the moment. Their certificates have expired, so you can't actually install anything from there. And I also noticed that the Xonotic FAQ says, they're not in the Debian archive for a list of reasons. And I thought, Snaps could fix that.
Yeah, totally.
So Xonotic isn't in the Ubuntu archive. It's only been available from GetDeb. So I thought I'd make a snap, and there is a snap now.
So I tested this earlier on I say tested, I joined a server, installed your snap, joined a server, and then got shot to death very, very quickly.
Yes.
by bots.
Yes.
not even by other human beings, by bots.
I think in the comments of the chat, it said something, Wimpy was tickled delicately with the shotgun by, insert name of bot. There's some amusing commentary in there. But yes, it's another game I will absolutely suck at, but apparently a game that other people will enjoy and now be able to install easily. So that's good.
Awesome. Good work. Right then, let's get on with things. So let's have a look at the news. What's first up on the news docket, Martin?
Well, continuing the theme, my new gaming persona, the news story this week that took my interest is one around Google preparing to take on Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo in the console wars.
Oh.
Yeah, so apparently Google have Project Yeti, which is a games console project. And there is some rumours going around that Google met with Games Studio at GDC and E3 this year, not just to discuss collaborations, but also to discuss studio acquisitions.
Right, and this is how Microsoft did it back in the day. They bought a few studios, and that helped them to have exclusive titles on the Xbox in the early days.
Yeah. Now, what's different about Project Yeti is that at the moment, what's understood about it is it's going to be a streaming solution. So something like GeForce Now, for those people that have an NVIDIA Shield, for example. So it's a big cloud compute platform, and then the actual console will be a low-powered client that can, stream these games over the internet.
I've seen, like, there's lots of people who've tried this in the past. I know Google have vast compute power, and they also have a client operating system, so they appear to have that magic combination, and other people have tried and tested this out in the past, like you say, NVIDIA with their Shield, and maybe they're the people who can get this working. So effectively, it's, bring your game to effectively Android, really, isn't it?
Yes, essentially, yes. I think that's what it's going to be, because, they've got the Vulkan support there, and they've got the encoder support, and there's more rumours going around that, despite the success that AMD have had with Xbox and PlayStation 4, a good fit for a hardware partner with Google would be NVIDIA because of the Shield. I have an NVIDIA Shield and a GeForce Now subscription, so I've had a play with this stuff in the past.
Is the latency and the lag not a problem? Especially for the Twitch gamers who like, to be a pixel perfect accuracy and no frames dropped and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand if it will be good enough for them.
Well, as a gaming enthusiast, I think I can answer this question. On the NVIDIA Shield, I couldn't perceive any significant lag. I don't know what magic is in this thing, but, I'm playing racing games, obviously, and, all of my maneuvers are being accurately represented, and I'm not struggling to find my breaking points and what have you. But, and I've got, for the purposes of illustration, I've got a 40 megabit down broadband connection.
Right, but still, your connection speed is only one thing. The server's probably in another country, and there's still going to be, no matter how big your computer at the other end, it's rendering frames that are going to have to be encoded by a processor, sent down cables to get to you. There's going to be some level of latency there added. It's not the same as a GPU connected and putting bits on a screen right in front of you. There is something there.
Correct. Absolutely. There's some latency there, but I don't know how they compensate for it, but there is some temporal magic that happens that, your controller input is immediately represented on the screen in front of you. And on a couple of the games on the NVIDIA Shield, you can access the settings of the game, and that in some cases will expose the configuration of the Windows machine in the data center, and they all have these massive Tesla GPUs from NVIDIA in them.
So that strikes me as interesting, because for this stuff to be running on the back end for Google, are they going to do a similar? Is Yeti going to do a similar kind of thing where the client is Android and the back end is Linux boxes? Are they going to get people to port to Linux on the back end, or are Google going to have a bunch of Windows machines in the cloud?
I think, the way that the NVIDIA service works is that they are Windows 8 and Windows Vista. I think last time I looked, but this was a while ago, VMs effectively with some, hardware pass-through magic.
Right.
And then all of the rendering happens on the GPU.
But this is all rumour and hearsay, so I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, interesting development though.
In other news, something which is actually tangible and you can get right now, Dell have announced new Precision Line Developer Edition laptops. So the Precision Line are designed for corporates. They're not aimed at home users, so they're higher end. There's a lot of configuration options you can choose, and they tend to be aimed at people running. In this case, it seems they're aiming to use all the buzzwords because they're aiming at machine learning and AI use cases and VR and all kinds of other stuff like that. All the latest buzzwords. But when you look at it, the specs are pretty interesting. There's two models, and one of them is 15-inch, one of them 17-inch, and they start at about $1,200. That's the start. And the choice of CPUs that go through from an i5 to an i7 up to a Xeon. Nice. And you can get GPUs that are either onboard GPUs that are either Intel, NVIDIA Quadro, or AMD Radeon Pro GPUs, and up to 64 gigs of RAM. So these are fully bunched up, decent spec, professional, in inverted commas, laptops. But the thing that I found interesting was you can also buy them with loads of options, with Dell, the sheet where you tick loads of radio buttons to choose what you want. But interestingly, in there is also an external GPU enclosure. And one of the options you can choose is an eGPU, an NVIDIA Quadro P6000, which has 24 gigabytes of RAM on the GPU. Adequate. And that's only going to add an additional $9,000 to the price tag of your laptop, which I thought was amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously these are high-end workstations used for, very interesting workloads that you and I are never going to run on our little tin pot laptops at home. But it's fascinating stuff.
Did you see if that eGPU connector was Thunderbolt or a proprietary interface?
I think I saw the word Thunderbolt.
Okay, that's good to see.
Thunderbolt, yes.
So I knew I was selling all of my laptops for a reason. I obviously don't need the $9,000 eGPU add-on, but it would be nice that I'd be able to get one of these to replace my outgoing laptops and take advantage of my existing eGPU solutions.
And it's worth pointing out that these things can have like multiple hard drives in them and all the usual stuff, and you can get them with Ubuntu pre-installed, which pretty cool,
very tasty.
So just to be clear, the eGPU box is a Sonnet Technologies eGFX Breakaway Box 550.
Right.
And that alone, without a graphics card, is $300. So I don't know if that thing is... Oh, yes, it does say connecting a high-performance desktop GPU card to a Thunderbolt 3 equipped computer. Perfect. So yes, it is.
So equivalent to the Razer Core devices that I have.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, in other news, SUSE has been acquired by EQT for $2.5 billion.
Million or billion?
Billion.
So that's 1 billion per user or something, is it?
I have no idea how this number was arrived at, but I think they were sold in 2010 for 2.2 billion. And then sold in 2014 for 1 point something billion, and now sold again for 2.4 billion. They've changed hands quite a lot recently. So acquired by Novell in 2004, then Attachmate with some money from Microsoft bought Novell and SUSE in 2010, and then in 2014 Micro Focus purchased Attachmate, and SUSE was spun off as its own division, and then this week Micro Focus has agreed to sell to EQT.
And EQT are an investment company, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So they've said there were some interesting quotes in there. So they've first of all said that SUSE will be returning to operating as an independent business, which it hasn't been under Micro Focus. It turns out. Mm-hmm. And EQT also made a statement. They said that investment into engineers was somewhat restricted under the prior ownership, and that will change.
Interesting. So does that mean they're going to grow the number of
they're talking
engineers?
A lot. Yeah, they're talking about, looking forward to the next growth phase of SUSE and being part of that innovation and expanding their portfolio of, open source and infrastructure capabilities.
Well, that's super good news for them.
Yeah,
isn't
it really is, I suppose. Richard Brown, who's the chairman of OpenSUSE, has sent a mail out on their mailing list to effectively say, this doesn't change anything. This will have no negative impact on OpenSUSE.
Did he get out his regular email that he sends out? Don't panic, Mr. Mannering.
I think he has a template now.
Right. He sent it enough times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And finally in the news, the BBC have released a vast computer history archive online. They've published an archive of 267 TV programs from the 1980s. Now, they've got loads of programs online, but the reason why these are particularly special is they're very nostalgic for people of a certain age, like you and I will remember watching some of these programs, such as the computer program, Making the Most of the Micro, and Micro Live.
I remember that one particularly.
Yes, and it's the archive has got clips of shows, the whole shows, but also has an embedded JavaScript BBC Micro emulator, so you can actually play and run through the demos that they did on the screen on the TV programs back in the day 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I shouldn't be surprised about this idea of emulators implemented in JavaScript, because it's been done thousands of times in the last 15 years or so, but every time I'm always impressed by that you can run an emulator in the web browser.
I guess as time goes on and everyone emulating something in JavaScript, a BBC Micro 10 or 15 years ago in JavaScript would have been unheard of. It just you wouldn't have a computer fast enough to do it. But now the machines are so fast that being able to run this stuff in JavaScript is possible.
And the advancements in Java, JITs and what have you.
Yes.
But isn't it a great way to have the content and effectively the computer that you can follow along with in the browser alongside the content? I think that's amazing.
It was funny. One of the because these are mostly orchestrated demos where they're recording the presenters. So the presenters, you may remember, Ian McNaught Davis, Chris Searle, Jill Neville, would be sat in front of a BBC Micro pressing buttons, and on the screen there was something appearing like a CFAX style page or an, in inverted commas, an email. And actually those were simulated. So for example, there's a program in there that you can run in the BBC Micro emulator, and you just press enter and it just moves down the screen. But on the TV, they would have been typing and pressing enter, and it looks like they're typing out an email, but it's all, in inverted commas, faked for the TV so that they could reproduce the demo over and over and over again. It's very clever.
Yeah, I think they took their cues from Top of the Pops there.
Yes. Well, okay. But anyway, I just find this fascinating, and it's very nostalgic and it's lovely. And I don't know of any other TV company on the planet that will be able to do something like this, thanks to the unique way the BBC is funded. And I think that's the end of the news.
Are you a freedom-hating iTunes user? Redeem yourself by helping spread the word about Ubuntu and open source. Leave a rating to tell others what you think of the Ubuntu podcast.
We're here with Daniel Foré from the Elementary Project. Hello, Daniel. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. So you've got a new release coming soon, haven't you? Juno.
I do.
And we wanted to catch up with you to see what's new, what's going on, what also people should get involved with. So give us the top level for those who've not heard of Elementary. I don't know who these people might be. What is Elementary, and why should people run it on their systems?
So if you've never heard of Elementary OS, we're a consumer-focused Linux-based desktop and laptop operating system. So we bill it as a fast and open replacement for Mac OS on your Mac or Windows on your PC. And
this is version 5, which is a change from your usual version numbering scheme.
Right.
What's going on there then?
So we kind of felt like, previously we'd done these, 0.x releases, right? Because we weren't really fully where we wanted to be with the vision of what we thought Elementary OS is. But we're at a point now where we have things like App Center going on. We have our own full desktop environment. We're shipping a suite of apps that are all developed in-house. We have a lot more of the features and things that we kind of envisioned for the big final product. So we're making that jump and saying, hey, this isn't just kind of like this experimental thing anymore. Like this is an operating system that's used in production. It's a full product. It's ready for kind of a bigger market.
Yeah, I mean, all of those features do sound like something that warrants a whole number version.
And so you've got a beta release. The final release isn't out yet. You've got a beta around about now. What's the goal with the beta? What do you want to achieve getting the beta out the door?
So the biggest thing for us is releasing the beta that we want to get third-party developers who are publishing apps in App Center to get on this pre-release so they can see what's changed, what's new, what's available, get their apps updated and published in the store. We also want to give a call out for anybody that's interested in helping us with translations, because we're at a string freeze right now, so we won't be changing any of the strings in our apps until release. So it's a really good time for translators to come in. We're also looking for people that are interested in helping us bug fix before the final release too.
So this is first and foremost, you're announcing a public beta that people can install, use as a development platform, use as a platform to help test and find last-minute wrinkles, or work on translations to go into what will be the final release.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. One of the first things I did was so Daniel was kind enough to issue Alan and I with advanced copies of the public beta, so we've been able to install it and take a look. And the first thing I did after installing it was start App Center, because I wanted to go and look at all of the cool apps. And I guess this is where you really want to get the app developers involved, because what I noticed is after it had applied the updates, I think the only curated apps that were in there right now are the ones that you're shipping, the ones that Elementary, the core team are providing, but I didn't find all of that 80 or so cool apps you've been curating with your community over the last couple of years or so.
Yeah, 95 now.
95. Well,
yeah, we're getting close.
So maybe 100 in time for final release if you're lucky.
That would be great. But yeah, so in this beta release, App Center is completely empty. So that's kind of, one of the things that's the purpose of the release in the beta is to make sure that developers can publish it, and we have a nice full store for when the final release goes out.
So is that, technically speaking, because you've moved from being based on one Ubuntu release to another Ubuntu release, people are going to have to rebuild their applications anyway, so and go through the publishing process. Have you changed that process? Is it just a case of people recompiling their stuff and pushing it into the store, or is there more to it than that?
So, the major technical hurdle is moving from being built on the Ubuntu 16.04 repositories to the 18.04 repositories. So that comes with all the cool API changes and breaks, between those versions. So one of the things that we're working on is trying to improve our publishing worker and our test suite to give better feedback to developers when they're publishing, so that we can keep the quality bar really high in App Center.
So for developers or prospective developers who are interested in developing apps for Elementary OS, you've got a whole system in place. I know you've got a lot of documentation about building Elementary apps. You've got a whole platform in place for people to build and get their stuff into the distro, right? Into App Center.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that is a major selling point for Elementary OS as opposed to a lot of other distros, is we have this way for the developers to directly publish their applications at any time.
Just so I get it right, they're developing Vala or Python or C. You're not mandating what people use, but the look and feel of the application, right, and how it's delivered. That's what you're mandating with your guidelines.
Yeah, so what we require is, first of all, to use GTK Plus, because we want to make sure that all the applications integrate with the system tools, the accessibility tools, that they work great with high DPI, that they're using all the same toolkit features, and they're familiar to users, right?
Right. So this is something you're very passionate about, is everything's got to look, consistent and feel like it's all part of the same environment, right?
Yeah, so for using our native toolkit is pretty important there. But we also are enforcing things like using reverse domain naming notation, and that lets us kind of scale up to making sure we don't have package naming conflicts and stuff as we're scaling up to having more and more applications in the store. And there are some other tests that we do to make sure that all the metadata is valid, and we require AppStream metadata, and that you're consistent between, what you call the name of your application in your .desktop is the same thing that you call it in App Center. And so there's a lot of tested through metadata as well.
Sweet.
We've talked a lot there about the focus that you have on ensuring that developers have the right documentation and tools and an easy pipeline to publish. But at the start of this conversation, you explained that Elementary OS is a consumer operating system. So all of this hard work to get developers involved, ultimately, this is something that people want to use. So the question is, what will users of Elementary OS 5 be looking forward to with this new release when it comes out after the beta test period?
So we have a ton of new features actually for users. Some of the big ones are improved support for keyboard shortcuts throughout a lot of different applications. We have a new shortcut cheat sheet that's kind of a flattering imitation of an Ubuntu Unity feature. We have Nightlight. We've done work on privacy and security settings. System settings, actually, in general, has got a ton of attention. There's tons of new stuff in there. You can change the acceleration profile of your mouse now, which is a popular requested feature. We've kind of gone through and tried to look at what are all the things that our users are asking us about and do as much as possible to bring in those things. And we've also done a ton of work under the hood on performance tuning and stability and closing issue reports. I think we have like over 700 issue reports closed in this release.
Since the last major release of Elementary 0.41. Right.
So I was, you mentioned performance then, and Martin mentioned you gave us a copy of the ISO to have a play with. I installed it on a ThinkPad, of course, and I had a play with it, and I was impressed with the polish and the performance. Yes, it felt very fluid switching between workspaces. I had a whole bunch of applications full screen, all the native Elementary OS apps. I had the browser and email and calendar all set up to connect to my personal and work stuff, and it all felt very fluid and very smooth. So I think you've done a really, really good job there, even though this is just a beta release in inverted commas. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is some of the design decisions you've made. So you've got the plank style dock at the bottom of the screen, and you've got the notification area in the top right. I noticed you've broken out the notifications, so it's slightly different from GNOME Shell. So someone coming from GNOME Shell might notice that notifications are in a different place, and the ability to configure the network is slightly different. What's the motivation behind those changes you've done there that set you apart from some of the other desktops?
Well, we introduced the notification center in the last release, actually. And I'm not sure, but I think we might have had that before GNOME Shell did. So that was something that we introduced beforehand. And in some ways, I guess it's kind of an evolution of what you had in Ubuntu with the messaging menu, right? But also kind of a callback to, other operating systems. You get this kind of a notification drawer or a notification center where you can reach back to your notifications pretty easily. So that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah, I was really impressed because I've long been frustrated with the way some of that stuff is presented in other desktops, and it totally made sense, and it felt intuitive, really easy to use. I could find stuff really easily, single click to find my battery statuses, single click to find my network status. It was all very, very nicely done, very tasteful and very clean.
A couple of the notification features that I noticed early on. The first was I installed Snapd because I wanted Firefox because I needed access to my LastPass passwords. So sorry. But I installed Firefox in a terminal, and then moments later I get a notification telling me that long-running process has finished, so that my snap install Firefox process had completed, which was great because I'd gone off and done other things, and then I was drawn back to this other task that I'd started work on. And when I looked then at the notification area, I could see that I could actually have a switch to say do not disturb, which is great when we're doing something like this right now, recording a podcast and talking to one another. I don't want notifications pinging off in all directions. So I really like that feature, and being able to go back to notifications I may have missed whilst I wandered off to make a cup of tea. So while I was poking around in the settings, I noticed a number of options for high DPI. So I originally installed the beta that you sent us on an Entroware Apollo, and have subsequently installed it on an XPS 13 with high DPI. And I have to say, although the Ubuntu telemetry reports suggest high DPI users are actually a very small audience. I was delighted with the implementation in Elementary. It worked in the live session. It worked automatically when I logged in post-install. I noticed there was attention to the boot splashes and everything. It's a really tight, high DPI experience that not many people are getting right, in my opinion. So well done on that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been putting a lot of work in this release into trying to make high DPI really good. We had kind of some basic support for high DPI in Loki, but this release we've gotten much better at it. The window manager Gala supports high DPI throughout the multitasking view and things like that now, and notifications are sized correctly. We've done a lot of work to make sure that thumbnails of images in all the different places you see those are rendered in high DPI so they're not, blurry or stretched out.
Now, having installed it twice, there was something I did notice, and that's that you're using Ubiquity, or a version of Ubiquity, which is, based on the traditional Ubuntu installer, which I was surprised to see because I know that Elementary OS have been instrumental in the work with System 76 on creating a new installer there. So is it possible we'll see a new installer for final release, or are you going with Ubiquity? And if so, why?
So we kind of made the hard decision to punt the installer to our next release. And the big problem with that is that since it's such a paradigm shift in how the installation is done, it requires an initial setup component. And so that's another component that we kind of have started development on, but really needs a lot of attention and care. And so we can't really do one without the other. So we're happy to work with System 76 on making the installer really good and kind of live vicariously through them in Pop! OS to do that component. And then I think that we might try to introduce the installer for like 5.1.
Okay, so within this series for Juno, that may come along at some point rather than in a couple of years' time when you build off the next LTS.
Right. Yeah, I don't see that there's any technical reason for us to wait until the next LTS. But we want to make sure that we're not pushing the release date for this release too far along, waiting for big features like the installer.
Right. So we're talking about the beta release here, but and you've mentioned the final release. I guess you've got the translations to land and new applications in the store to land before final release. Do you have a target in mind for final release date, or is it's ready when it's ready?
I want to have as quick as a turnaround time as possible. So I think it'll depend on how our translation community feels that we've done, and if there's a lot of work there to do with them. And it'll depend on how long it takes to get the third-party developers really feeling like they're able to update their stuff. So I can't necessarily give a date on when the final release is going to happen, but ideally it's really fast. We'll get this out, and developers will be able to publish their apps quickly, and we won't find any major show-stopping issues, and we'll be able to push out that final release.
Okay.
Awesome.
And do you anticipate anyone jumping on this beta will be able to install it and ride that beta all the way through to final release just through updates, or will they require a reinstall along the way?
So one thing we discovered during our last release in particular was that whether or not we want people to do that, they'll do that anyway. So we've kind of made a change. Previously, we'd release a beta and we did it using our unstable daily channel because that was convenient for developers to continually get updates. But the problem with that is that there's no real mechanism for us to update from the daily channel to the stable channel. So we decided that what we're going to do this time is releasing the beta using the stable channel, and we're going to do our best to treat it as a production release and try to make that upgrade process smooth. But you are going to get the best experience installing the final release instead of trying to upgrade from beta, because you never know, what kind of things we run into, what configurations might change, and what kind of things aren't easy to update.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about developers and users here. What are the top 2 things you want developers to come and focus on and look at with this release? And what are the top 2 things you want the users to come and enjoy that you've put hard work into?
I think for developers, probably the top things that I want them to be able to do is take advantage of the new APIs we've introduced, the new things we've introduced through our style sheet. A big one is the new location services and the agent that comes along with that. So we're going to be more strict in the store about applications that are requesting location will need to use GeoClues, so it goes through that agent. So we want to make sure that developers are on board with us trying to make sure that users are in control of their privacy. And I think the top things for users are probably to try to break through this idea that Elementary OS doesn't have settings or that it can't be used with a keyboard-focused workflow or things like that. I want developers to know that we put a lot of time into listening to the concerns that they had with moving through the system using shortcuts and being able to drill down into the preferences that they need and things like that.
Yeah, I noticed as coming at it from a user point of view when I tested the beta, you mentioned earlier the pop-up screen that shows you the keyboard shortcuts. I found that incredibly useful because my muscle memory is used to like keyboard shortcuts in one particular desktop or another, and I'm old. I've learned a lot of them over the years, but it was really, really nice to have that pop up there when I hit the super key to just tell me, here's how you switch desktops, here's how you search for applications and all that kind of stuff. And it really helped me feel like this is a keyboard centric desktop. Yep. It's designed for me to get productive, hands on the keyboard, and get working. It was a great experience.
Echo everything you've just said. I mashed the super key. There was the list of shortcuts, and it was like, all of the same stuff's available that I'm used to, but there's a few subtle differences, and it immediately orientated me. I've got one little bit of feedback for you that I got with a recent release I did of another distro. You hit super key to bring it up. It'd be nice if you could hit super key to tuck it away as well. We got asked about that for some things that we added.
Yeah, that's an issue report that we're tracking, and it's kind of tricky, the interaction between what the window manager wants to do and what the application wants to do. And we're trying to make it do that. Right now, what happens is that when you hit super, it's actually the window manager that's taking that keyboard input, so it's getting focus, and the window auto closes when it loses focus, so it's like the window closed but you hit super, so it opens again.
We been there. I appreciate the pain you're in having to pass X atoms and events around the place to the appropriate applications. Yes, big fat mess.
One thing that it did make me feel it was very familiar, and I thought back to when I was playing with a Mac a few months ago when Martin and I were in Seattle, and I was showing Martin the experience on Mac OS when you full screen all your applications and you just switch workspace to switch between your stuff, and how fluid that was. And it was very reminiscent of that, obviously having the dock at the bottom and the theme like makes it feel very much like Mac OS. So I would imagine this would be very familiar for people who are coming from Mac OS.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with what I've seen from this early beta, and it's now on my XPS 13, which is my travelling laptop, and I'm going to stick with it for however long I need to stick with it for. So it's replaced my distro, and I'll be using that as my work laptop for a bit. So I'll be sure to poke you if I find anything new, interesting, or unusual.
Right on. Yeah, I'm excited to hear from you about that.
So thanks so much for coming on, Dan. I hope the beta goes well. Where's the best place for people to find out about this stuff? Where can they go to find out all about the beta and where they can get involved?
So, first of all, we publish regular stories on our Medium blog. So that's a great place to kind of follow along with the development we're doing and find out more information as we release it. Mm-hmm. And that's at medium.com/elementaryOS. And if you want to get directly to the beta, we're releasing that through our developer site, and there's a whole bunch of other documentation there for developers. So that's developer.elementary.io.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for talking to us. Hope it all goes well, and maybe we'll get you back on when the final release goes out and you've had a chance to relax a little bit. Maybe that's optimistic. Thanks for coming on, Dan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
We can never have too much feedback. Reading your feedback means that we have to come up with less content. So if you're a Redditor, you can comment on our shows through our subreddit, /r/Ubuntu podcast.
And that's all for episode 17. Gosh, we managed to get through it without Mark. Did we mention that Mark's on holiday?
No, we didn't. We completely glossed over that fact that we haven't got Mark with us this week.
Mark who?
Yes, Mark, the sensible one.
Yes, the one who actually plays games. Yes, him. Anyway, we'll be back next week when we'll go over the community news and we'll interview some members of the community team and go over your feedback. See you next time.
And stop recording.